Welcome to Georgia Highlands College Math 97 and Math 99 tutorial videos. In this video segment, we'll be answering the question, how do you factor a rational expression with opposite factors? Well, the first step is to put all factors in standard form if they're not already there. And then you're going to factor a negative 1 from the opposite factor. And we're calling the opposite factor the one that has a leading negative term. And then finally, you'll proceed just like you would with simplifying any other rational expression and divide the common factors out. Let's take a look at a couple of examples to help us better understand this concept. All right, so if you take a look at this top example, I have x minus 3 over 3 minus x. And the first thing that probably jumps out at you is that the denominator is not in standard form. So according to the steps that we just discussed, the first thing we want to do is to put that denominator in standard form by just reversing the order of the terms. And that would give us negative x plus 3. So when we put this in standard form, it becomes more apparent that we have opposite binomials in the numerator and the denominator. And what an opposite binomial is that you have the same terms, but all of the signs are completely opposite of each other. So just to point that out, this x in the numerator is understood to be positive, and the x in the denominator is negative. The 3 in the numerator is negative, and the 3 in the denominator is positive. So these are considered opposite polynomials. All right, so we've established that we have opposite polynomials. The next step is to factor the negative 1 out of the opposite factor. And since our denominator is the factor with a leading negative term in it, that's the one that we'll factor the negative 1 out of. So I'm just going to rewrite my numerator, x minus 3, and then I'm going to factor a negative 1 out of the terms in my denominator, and I'm left with positive x plus 3. Alrighty, so, no, positive x minus 3. Let me take that off. The wonders of technology. Positive x minus 3 there. Sorry about that. Negative divided by a positive is a negative. All right, so I just want to point out before we move any further that there is always an understood 1, positive 1 being multiplied with anything. So I'm just going to write that positive 1 in there to hold that place. And I say hold the place because the next step in this process is to go ahead and divide out common terms. Well, you can see, common factors. You can see that we have a common factor of x minus 3. So the reason that I put that understood 1 in the numerator was to hold that place. So now we have 1 divided by negative 1. And we should know by now that 1 divided by negative 1 leaves us with a negative 1. So the simplified form of this rational expression is negative 1. Moving to the next example, it's a little more complex, so I thought it would be a good idea to take a look at it. A few more steps involved with this one because we actually have to do some factoring before we can begin dividing out that negative 1 as well as dividing out common factors. So hopefully you notice that the binomial in the numerator represents a difference of squares. So this can be factored as 3x plus 7 times 3x minus 7. And I'm just going to put my denominator into standard form for this first simplification. So negative 12x plus 28. Now I want to go ahead and factor the negative out of the opposite factor because I don't like to have that leading negative term. So I'm just going to rewrite my numerator, 3x plus 7 times 3x minus 7, and go ahead and factor that negative 1 out of the denominator, and that leaves me with positive 12x minus 28. Whenever you factor any polynomial, you always want to check and make sure that it cannot be factored further, and in this case, I can factor 12x minus 28 further. There is a GCF of 4 sitting in there. So I still have 3x plus 7 times 3x minus 7 in the numerator. And now I have negative 1 times 4 times 3x minus 7 in the denominator. Hopefully bells and whistles are going off in your head. Oop, I've got common factors of 3x minus 7 that I can divide out, because anything divided by itself is just 1. And now pay close attention to how you write this final simplified form of this rational expression. It's bad form to leave that bottom as a negative, so it's more preferable to bring that negative 1 out front, because you see we have 3x plus 7 divided by basically negative 4. So it's a positive divided by a negative, which is just going to make this entire expression negative. So I'm going to pull that negative 1 out front, and it will be multiplied with the entire expression, 3x plus 7 divided by 4. So your final simplified form of the rational expression is negative 3x plus 7 over 4. So I hope that this has been helpful in helping you understand how to factor these expressions that contain what we call opposite factors, where you've got the same terms but the signs are exactly opposite of each other. And the way to deal with that is to just factor that negative 1 out, because it changes the signs of all the terms behind it. And then finally you'll just simplify like you know how to and divide those common factors out. If you have any other questions regarding opposite factors and how to simplify rational expressions that contain them, please contact your Highlands instructor. Thank you.